I'm on a nonprofit in Virginia. I'm the field director for a group called Virginians for Alternatives to the Death Penalty. And we are looking to end the death penalty in Virginia. Do you have the death penalty in New York? You done away with it?
It's tossed.
Yeah, well, it's still alive and well in Virginia. In fact, on July 6th, Virginia is looking to execute a man named William Morva, who is profoundly mentally ill. And so he's delusional, but he killed 2 law enforcement officers. So the deck's stacked against him. So we're not holding out much hope that Governor McAuliffe will actually commute his death sentence to life in prison, but we're still holding out hope that he will. So anyway, that has nothing to do with what's going on here tonight. I spent about 3 years, well, let's go back a little bit to 1981, and I'll show you a little bit of my introduction here in a minute. I was a publisher of an underground paper back in the 1980s. Now, the term underground was a moot point by 1980. The underground press, as we know it, as history books record it, started in about 1964, and by 1972 was pretty much done. Okay, the underground press was done in 72. Why in 72? Why did it end? Well, they stopped the draft, for one thing. And then Vietnam ended in 75, and that was a death knell. The underground papers were held together by anti-Vietnam sentiment. So when that happened, the underground press started dying. And a lot of the papers died before that too, because papers back in those days were prone more to be held together by friendship rather than corporate policy. So you got a tiff between the editor and the managing editor, the paper could very well die because one of them would quit and walk away. So anyway, but I'm going to get into that a little bit more as we move forward. This is about fake news. You've heard of the FBI? It's been in the news a couple times here lately. The FBI's got quite a history with the underground press, and the CIA also. Now, the CIA actually got involved in the underground press right before the FBI did, but I'll talk about the CIA second, because the FBI stuff is much more interesting. So remember Admiral Stockdale? Who am I? Why am I here? Do you remember him? I think it was the 1992 vice presidential debate. The first thing he said was, who am I? Why am I here? And all of a sudden everybody thought he had Alzheimer's. So who am I? Well, I started my publishing career in 1978, before any of you were born. I was the art director at VCU, earning my BFA in Fine Arts. I recently, in 2012, went back to VCU and got my MFA in Fine Arts too. So now I've got my license plate on my card, BFA, MFA. But I got it in writing, not in painting, like my BFA. I published Throttle magazine. Now the capital T's in Throttle, that's not a typo. It actually was a typo when we started the magazine in 1981. We trying to design the logo of one of these old comp edit machines. And when it came out, that's how it came out. So we said, ooh, that looks, I said, oh, you know what, let's keep that. We'll use it in marketing. Tough, tenacious, and timely. Something like that, anyway. So anyway, we started Throttle magazine. It was a kind of an underground monthly arts and culture tabloid. It started out as underground, but then Budweiser bought our back page ads. So all of a sudden we were above ground because we had color, and we had a big Budweiser ad on the back. I was with it until 1987. Believe it or not, Throttle hung around until 1999, which is like a record for an unfinanced, all-volunteer alternative news magazine. Currently, I do a history column for the Stanton News Leader. It's a Stanton, Virginia paper, a small paper, probably about the size of your Buffalo paper here. What's the name of the Buffalo News? Yeah. I do a weekly or bi-weekly history column. I had a story in USA Today a while back about, you've heard of the Lovings? The movie came out here recently. Okay, it was an interracial couple in Virginia who challenged the miscegenation law in 1967. The 50th anniversary just came and went. And they got the law beat. Well, I found out there was another couple in Virginia 85 years earlier, a black man and a white woman who had gotten married named Kinney. And the Kinneys are the ones that prompted Virginia to even create the miscegenation law that the Lovings did away with. So I did an article for USA Today about that. Richmond Magazine, Style Weekly, the Austin Chronicle in Austin, Texas. And there are several more publications that I work with. I've had 7 books published. My 8th book coming out is going to be The Virginia State Penitentiary, A Notorious History. That book will be coming out in late September, early October. Like David said, my page proofs just came while I was on the plane to Buffalo. And so I've been looking at the page proofs today. They look pretty good. So it's one of my longer books, 80. It's going to have 80 illustrations in it. So when that book comes out, if you're interested at all in Virginia's incarceration history, and it is ugly, to say the least. We had eugenics being practiced in the prison as early as 1900, involuntary sterilizations on prisoners. We had children as young as 9 and 10 years old incarcerated with adults. It was just relentless. But I break it up with some lighthearted stuff too. I realized I had to, or no one would read this thing. And I'm currently, like I said, I'm the full-time field director for Virginians for Alternatives to the Death Penalty. So, moving along, let's jump back to 1956, really in a way. COINTELPRO, which stood for Counterintelligence Program, and nothing was more counterintelligent than this program, I can assure you. It was originally a domestic spying program that started in the 50s. And the one that they started to infiltrate the underground press was based on one that Hoover had created for the Ku Klux Klan to infiltrate them in the early 60s. It was right after the Mississippi civil rights workers were killed in 1964 that the KKK COINTELPRO program started. And Hoover based it directly on that for the New Left. It continued until 1971. It was not long. It lasted about 3 years. It did a lot of damage in 3 years, though. And I'll show you some of the damage that it did. This is a memorandum. This is the original memorandum. I submitted 16 Freedom of Information Act requests to the FBI over a 2 or 3 year period. Now, here's the thing. Has anybody ever submitted a FOIA request to the federal government? Yeah, you might have. How'd it go?
Terrible.
Yeah. Yeah, sure did.
Nothing.
Nothing.
Very slow.
Very slow. Yeah. I submitted my first Freedom of Information request because I was looking for a specific phony underground newspaper that the FBI had created and distributed at American University in D.C., which I'll talk about in a minute. And after about 30 days, I got a response. And it was, they sent me a memo that looked just like this, except it was from 1971, and it was from a low-level manager declaring a moratorium on purchasing filing cabinets. So they responded, just like they were legally obligated to do. But they don't have to respond with the right thing. They can respond with the word no, too. Or they can respond by telling you, you owe us $56,000 to research and print the materials you're looking for. I have a friend at UVA. She was in the doctoral program, getting her PhD. She submitted a request to the FBI for documents pertaining to El Chapo. The, what was it? He was he was arrested for drugs down in Colombia, I think. She got a bill for over $1 million. She said, they said it's 57,000 pages of material. It would cost about $1.2 million. And she said, yeah, right. So that was the end of that. A couple chairs up here, sir. So yeah, so this is one of the documents that I got with my 16th FOIA request. When I finally started getting some stuff, I got a link, a download link from the FBI. And I clicked on the link and went to it, and it was a directory. And it had 4,500 documents in that link. Do you know what 4,500 documents looks like? It's like Stephen King's The Stand times 5. You know, I downloaded everything. Now I probably downloaded every virus, they're probably watching everything that happens on me, but I downloaded everything, and the next day the link was gone. So I got kind of lucky in a way, but I got everything I was looking for. It was finally there on the 16th try. So anyway, this is a memo from Charles Brennan to William Sullivan. I guess they were underlings to J. Edgar Hoover, talking about our nation were undergoing an era of disruption and violence caused to a large extent by various individuals generally connected with the New Left. New Left student movement. They were the enemy. But what's telling about this is the center of it. The purpose of this program, this COINTELPRO program, is to expose, disrupt, and otherwise neutralize the activities of this group and persons connected with it. It is hoped that with this new program, their violent and illegal activities may be reduced, if not curtailed. So Hoover saw it and said, sounds good to me. Let's move forward. Now, you're probably thinking, wait a minute. Weren't they already going after the black nationalists? Yeah, well, COINTELPRO, they were already going after the black nationalists. But they had 5 goals for going after the black nationalists, too. The prevention of a coalition of black groups. They didn't want all these black groups coming together and forming a coalition. He wanted to stop the prevention of the rise. He wanted to stop a rise of a black messiah, his words. He had a couple of people he was worried about becoming a black messiah. Prevention of violence from the black national movement. He didn't want them to gain respectability, certainly. And talk about taking away respectability. I'll show you an example later of how he completely took away respectability from the black nationalist movements, particularly the Black Panthers. With a prevention of long-range growth of these organizations. We have another chair up here, sir, if you like one.
Oh, thanks.
Sure.
Oh, yeah.
You're right behind the light pole. And especially, Hoover said in a memo that he thought Dr. Martin Luther King was going to be his dreaded black messiah. So you read into this anything you want. And I say later, I'm not really a conspiracy theorist, but you know, Hoover sure did put Dr. King in his crosshairs. And things turned quite bad for Dr. King because of that. So the facts are immaterial. Hoover said, this is right from a memo to the Chicago field office, the purpose is to disrupt the Black Panther Party and it is immaterial if facts exist to substantiate the charge. Don't need facts. Do whatever you want. This is the same attitude he took with the New Left movement. The exact same attitude. Facts don't matter. Whatever it takes to shut them down, that's what we're going to do. So this is Quicksilver Times. This is a Washington, D.C. based underground paper. So all this SDS activity and anti-Vietnam sentiment was growing. And Hoover took it upon himself to judge which ones were deemed national security threats. Now, he was setting his program up with no oversight. He didn't go to the president. He didn't go to Congress. He didn't go to anybody. He just decided he was going to do it based on Sullivan and Brennan's suggestion. So he did. So we just set this thing up. And so he basically said all of them. All of them were threats. Ma'am, there's a chair up here if you want it.
Thank you. I'm okay.
Okay. So he gave final approval then to what would become COINTELPRO, Disruption of the New Left. A program linked to the CIA programs that I mentioned earlier that I'm going to talk about later. Project Resistance, Project MERRIMAC, and Operation Chaos. Anybody ever heard of those? Operation Chaos, that's the one, man. That's like the cream of the crop right there. And you know, chaos didn't stand for anything. It stood for chaos. But here's the thing. The lack of any formal FBI definition of New Left, it was not accidental. The thing is, it gave Bureau leeway to target all the groups. All of them. We're just going to assume that all of them are violent until they prove otherwise. Okay? Even if they were non-violent, even the Quakers. The Quakers. Come on. Really? So the primary consideration for the appropriateness of all of this was not whether they were insidious, unconstitutional, dangerous, or even patently illegal, which they were. But only whether they could potentially expose or embarrass the Bureau. So almost every memo that you see that comes out of this period has, in preparing and distributing this material, you should take all steps necessary to ensure the Bureau cannot be identified as the source of the pamphlet. That was their primary consideration. Make sure we're not exposed. They went through great lengths to do that too. So American University, anybody familiar with American University in downtown DC? My daughter went there for a semester, then she changed majors and came back to VCU, but there are things going on back then, in 1968, at American University, it was right under the FBI's nose, and Hoover couldn't stand it. It was driving him crazy. General Lewis Hershey, who was later lampooned mercilessly in the underground press under the name General Mars Bar. So anytime you see General Mars Bar, they're referring to General Lewis Hershey. There was a protest of a speech by him. Students walked out on bestowment of an honorary degree to Henry Cabot Lodge. Oh, that really ticked off a bunch of people. And then there was a campus demonstration after the death of Dr. King, which called for a boycott of classes. And the FBI memo, of course, chimed in and said, well, they're condoning the looting and burning of stores by Negroes in Washington, D.C. Do you know what happened in D.C. right after Martin Luther King was killed? Are you aware of the scope? 1,000 buildings were burned. 1,000. There were tanks in the streets of Washington, D.C. after Martin Luther King. So right there, here was the FBI right in the middle of all this chaos. And they said, and American University saw as being a big part of it. They said, you know what, we're going to put a stop to it. So, something had to be done. So what did they do? Some Washington special agent in charge, every field office across the country had an SAC, a SAC, which is special agent in charge. Don't always know who these people are. Their names don't always show up, or sometimes they're redacted. So I don't know. So in August of 1968, this SAC of the Washington, D.C. field office went to Mr. Hoover and said, I've got an idea. We'll create a phony 4-page offset printed underground newspaper, carefully designed to discredit the radical influences of American University. What could possibly go wrong, right? So Hoover was a micromanager. Nothing happened without going through him. So they went back and forth on this idea 3 or 4 times until finally things started moving forward. So here's the memo where finally, authority is granted to print and distribute copies of the Rational Observer, submitted by your letter of 1069. In preparing and distributing the material, of course, you should take all steps necessary to assure that the Bureau cannot be identified as the source of blah, blah, blah. Make sure you can't trace it back to us. They had these people they called cutouts. And cutouts were non-FBI people that they would use as couriers and to do certain jobs for them. So you'll see sometimes in the memo, you'll see make sure you use a cutout. So that's what they're referring to in this case. Now, the original title of it was not the Rational Observer. It originally had a title that I kind of liked. It was called Che-Vara News. Che-Vara. They just took Che Guevara's name and combined it. And boom, there it is. Fake news is born. The first issue of the Rational Observer, it did land with a very clumsy thud on the AU campus around the end of September. And it is the funniest, most awful thing you've ever read. And it just showed how just the FBI had no idea how to deal with the New Left student movement. And it shows. And I'll show you some close-ups of some of the articles that came out of this. It was a 4-page, 8.5 by 11. I had to clean it up a little bit because it was a mess. And certain other pages are redacted. Some things are redacted in it, but luckily nothing was redacted on the front page. It says an alternative American University campus newspaper. Now I did find a man named Gary Nordlinger. He's now a business consultant in Washington, D.C. And I tracked him down and he said, I do remember the Rational Observer. He says, I remember somebody handing them out, a student handing them out, but he didn't remember anything about it. I talked to him in 2012. He had no idea it was an FBI phony. No idea. He just thought it was just a paper that somebody was taking out there. But the FBI wanted students to think that other students were publishing it. So that's the kind of the tact they took. What is the Rational Observer? It's an attempt by a small group of students who love democracy to preserve democracy and who believe that evil exposed is evil eliminated. And of course, it is unfortunate we cannot identify ourselves Before we take classes with some who do not believe in freedom and grade accordingly. Oh, those bad professors, they're going to give bad grades because they're publishing an alternative newsletter. Of course, it's FBI agents anyway, so it doesn't matter. It's a moot point, isn't it? Drugs. If you must freak out on society, don't turn on with drugs. Drugs offer only temporary relief. They're not the Deus ex machina you seek. Turn to your rabbi, minister, priest. Yes, your parents, for help in solving your hang-ups. And then a note to President Williams, he was president of American University. Don't turn your back on drug abuse at American University. You might come back. Vietnam War. Many people from the entire political spectrum are against the war in Vietnam. Don't hesitate to question the motives of the SDS, the SMC, YSA, and MOBI. Now, the 60s was the decade of acronyms, right? So sometimes I had to put in my book, which, by the way, is this one, Independent Press in DC and Virginia, which is all this information is in. And unfortunately, I ordered some, but they didn't arrive in time for me to leave to come here. But Leslie said, if you let him know, he's going to get a bunch of them from a wholesaler. My other one was called Richmond Independent Press. This is just Richmond only. Okay? So I had to put a whole list of acronyms at the beginning of this book to show people what the heck we're talking about. So the SDS, of course, is Students for Democratic Society. They were recognized by the FBI as probably the most violent and most dangerous of the student groups, except for the Weather Underground, of course, which came out of the SDS. The SMC, which is Student Mobilization Committee. YSA was the Young Socialists, and MOBE was Mobilization to End the War, Students Mobilization to End the War, I think. Remember, you'll be faced with joining society upon completion of your academic training. So don't do anything in haste today which causes you embarrassment tomorrow. That proved to be a rather telling sentence later on. You'll see why. What to do about evil? If you recognize evil, what to eliminate? Call the president, your rabbi, your minister, your priest. Or, better yet, call the FBI. What a great idea. Or the Metropolitan Police Department. Without your assistance, they're helpless. So, you know, they wanted people. Did somebody really think other students were writing this? I don't know. But it's like, can you be more ham-handed? So yeah, whoops. So researchers much better than me. And I say that with all sincerity because Ivan Greenberg wrote a great book called Surveillance in America. And if you ever look at that book, he devotes an entire page in the back of it to his search for the rational observer. And he ran into so much double talk, so many dead ends, he finally just gave up. There were some others too. Ken Waxberger, who's a friend of mine, there are two books of his down there in the corner called Voices of the Underground. I strongly urge you to look them up and read them if you can. It's a 2-volume set. Ken looked for the rational observer for a long time. He couldn't locate it. And some of you said, well, it doesn't really exist. Well, I knew it existed because I found a court case where it was mentioned. So, aha, if it went to court, then it must have been real. So it was. So it only took me 2 years and 16 Freedom of Information Act requests. But I was convinced it existed, and so I wasn't going to give up on it. Flag burning in American? Does the student body that you know that American flag was burned? Do you condone this sort of action? And once again, remember, this is a rational observer. We're being rational here. Let's not jump to any conclusions. This is a cartoon that was in the Rational Observer. Quite possibly the worst excuse for a cartoon I've seen. It's the head of President Williams on a bull of some sort, tied by a collar to a hairy beast with SMC. So it's saying that President Williams is a slave of the Student Mobilization Committee. And he's saying, all right, I'll call you master in this. Whether anybody would have paid a bit of attention to this, I don't know. But, so what were the effects of the Rational Observer? Well, we don't really know. We don't really know how many editions were actually published. I only found one, which I consider pretty amazing that I found one. But apparently there may have been 2 or 3 or as many as 4. We don't even know what the long-term effect was, if any. Now, I did find a December 4th, 1969 FBI memo from the Washington field office that he boasted. Of course, he had zero documentation to back it up. But he says that as a result of this publication, sources advised that students on the campus became aware of the nature of SNC and its affiliations with the Young Socialist Alliance, and as a result of this, refused to participate in an SMC planned demonstration. Who knows if that's true or not? He could have just been blowing smoke for Hoover. But Hoover insisted on tangible results. He wanted to know what tangible results were. So, yeah, you see all kinds. You start reading these memos, you see all kinds of bogus results published, just trying to appease Mr. Hoover. Oh, and the Rational Observer was not the only one either. Turned out there was a couple of others. Armageddon News. From September of '68 through March of '69, the Bureau created and distributed 2 editions of an underground paper at University of Indiana, Bloomington, called Armageddon News. And actually had a pretty cool masthead, I thought, but once again, it's pretty much just like the Rational Observer. I guess it's good that we need more chairs. Thanks for coming, you all. Armageddon News was the third of a 4-phase approach to neutralization and deterrent of the New Left, which is kind of a scary phrase to me, at Bloomington, of all places. Was it really that bad in Bloomington? I don't know. According to a memo from the Indianapolis special agent, "Don't let the New Left win the Armageddon." IU was the catchphrase for that one. It was pretty much like the Rational Observer. It wasn't quite as hokey, not quite as, didn't quite have the diminished capacity, I guess, that the Rational Observer had. But there were 4, you'll see this is volume 2, number 1, which really doesn't mean much. Basically, there was 4 editions of Armageddon News were published at Bloomington. The Indianapolis special agent in charge requested 25,000 copies. Hoover approved a print run of 200. I don't know why. So in September 9th and 16th, they were mailed anonymously to student leaders, fraternities, and sororities. And once again, no clue what the impact of it really was. Whoops. But then they ceased publication by November of 1969. And then, once again, the special agent in charge was crowing about the results of it. He said it was reprinted. The first one was reprinted in a local daily newspaper in Bloomington, which I could not find, by the way. I don't know what he was talking about. And he said 5,000 copies were reprinted and distributed by conservative organizations at IU. I guess it could be true. I don't know. Who knows? Remember, facts are immaterial, right? Oh, and then down in San Antonio, they came up with a good one down there, the Longhorn Tale. The FBI San Antonio field office wrote to Mr. Hoover and said, you know, we could do a phony paper down here, a 1-page throwaway document which could be printed to expose and point out the identities of New Left individuals who are causing disruption. They had a big problem in San Antonio. The FBI thought they had a big problem. They had a coffee house down there called the Oleo Strut. Anybody know what an Oleo Strut is? It's a piece of a helicopter, apparently. So anyway, they had this coffee shop called the Oleo Strut. And all these students were working there, and people were, some local servicemen would come hang out there. They had these coffee shops were popping up near military bases all around the country, and they said, you can leave your military bearing at the door, because once you come in here, you're like a normal person. So that was the whole purpose of these coffee shops. They had a big one in Washington, D.C. It was the same way. So the FBI started sending letters out to the parents. They found out who the parents of the students working in the coffee shops were, telling them, you know your kid's smoking pot, you know your kid's participating in orgies, you know your kid, you're just blatantly lying, just to break everything up and be a disruption. So then the San Antonio field office came up with a brilliant idea. You got to, this memo is just priceless. It is said, it is to be noted that the mascot for the University of Texas is a Texas Longhorn steer. San Antonio feels that this title is a play upon words. and feels that it could possibly be effective under this program. Thank God it is a play upon words. That makes it right. How more dumb can you? So they went to work. Very professional mock-ups. Seriously, I didn't make these up. This is what they actually proposed. But then, this was a final for the longhorn tail. But, unfortunately, this one never paid it past the masthead. Hoover pulled the plug on new left activity in Austin. School had let out. All the radicals had gone home. He said it just wasn't worth it, not enough activity there. So they kind of just let it go. So unfortunately for me and for all of us today, there's no longhorn tail. It never came together.
There's just a longhorn head.
I'm sorry?
There's just a longhorn head.
Just longhorn head, that's all we got. Yeah, that's all we got. Any questions on these so far? These papers? Because we're moving into darker territory. COINTELPRO went from goofy and went to ugly and stupid. If you didn't think it was stupid before, wait till you see what comes next. This is a memo from the Chicago field office, and I blew up the pertinent part of it. They had a contact who was in close proximity to Black Panther Party newspapers when they were delivered in bundles to the city. So he came up with an idea. The Bureau is requested to prepare and furnish to Detroit, this is Detroit field office, I'm sorry, in liquid form, a solution capable of duplicating a scent of those foul-smelling feces available. In this case, it might be appropriate to duplicate the feces of the species Sus scrofa. And you see at the bottom paragraph, a quart supply with a dispenser capable of squirting a narrow stream for a distance of 3 feet. They're going to spray back Black Panther newspapers with pig shit. That's what a Sus scrofa is. It's a pig. They were going to get a liquid that smelled like pig shit and spray it on the papers so they couldn't distribute them. No word if it ever really happened. I couldn't find a response from Hoover, so I don't know if it worked or not. And then we got the SDS New Laugh Notes. Now, this was a parody publication. The SDS, Students for Democratic Society, was creating a paper called New Left Notes. So in an attempt to discredit the SDS, the FBI comes up with New Laugh Notes. And that is where our poster image came from. This is Bernadine Dorn. She and Bill Ayers and Tom Hayden were presidents, were the leadership of the SDS. So they were given the impression that she's raising the dues so she could take vacations. Another one page from New Laugh Notes. A leader is chosen. Okay, that's Tom Hayden. And if you look, there's a ring on the fist that says CIA. So it's saying that the Tom Hayden, president of the SDS, is a puppet of the CIA. That's supposed to sow discord among the SDS, make them believe that they can't trust their leadership. This went on. There was about 6 or 7 of these illustrations. But really, these 2 are all you need to see. The rest of them are just like, oh, jeez. Then, COINTELPRO got dangerous. And it really got dangerous with this, the Black Panther coloring book. Anybody ever hear of this? All right, this is probably, if you know anything about the Black Panthers, when they first started, you know what they did? They were serving breakfast to inner city children in the city of Chicago. That's pretty brutal, isn't it? That needs to be shut down. We can't have these young black men in these berets with aprons serving breakfast to inner city children in Chicago. So here's what they did. It was conceived and produced by the Chicago field office. It was mailed to primarily white supporters of the Panthers' inner city children's breakfast program in the hopes they would withdraw financial support. What do you think happened? Well, it worked. And here's why. Here's a page from it. It's a terrible reproduction. I'm sorry, but the pages weren't very good. This is a pig. he tries to control black people. Power comes through the barrel of a gun. And of course, the pig is afraid of black children because they are brave warriors. What do you think the reactions of the backers of the breakfast program was to this? They were mortified. They said, this is what the Panthers stand for? We thought they were serving breakfast to black children. Heck, we're pulling our support. So they did. And the breakfast program fell apart. And that was the start of the Black Panthers becoming more militant. Because they knew, and it led to the death of Fred Hampton. It's a great book right over here on the shelf. On the top up there, The Death of Fred Hampton. I urge you to read it. It's horrifying. If you don't know anything about it, you need to know about it. It's horrifying. He was lying in bed with his pregnant girlfriend. And the FBI and the Chicago police conspired to create some sort of rift between the Black Panthers and another black nationalist group, and it led to the Chicago police breaking into the apartment and shooting Fred Hampton dead while he was lying in bed beside his pregnant girlfriend. And then we have Columbia Records. Anybody remember Columbia Records? Pretty big record company. In January of '69, the FBI started a campaign against advertisers in the underground press to induce them to pull their ads and cause financial hardships. So Columbia Records was the largest advertiser in the alternative media. They were huge. They bought ads in most major city underground papers. So they were quickly in the crosshairs of the FBI. And Life magazine was targeted too because of an article friendly to the New Left movement, although they were not advertisers. So a memo from the FBI says financial assistance from Life and from Columbia Records appears to be giving active aid and comfort to enemies of the United States. So what are the boards of directors of Columbia Records and Time Magazine going to do when they are called enemies of the United States? It's pretty clear cut what's going to happen. So the tactic worked. After an anonymous letter campaign to stockholders, Columbia pulled all advertising from the underground press in February of '69. They never acknowledged any strong arming, but they did say, well, the underground press is no longer a viable advertising vehicle. In 1969, there were 400 underground papers in America. It had gone from 26 papers in 1967 to 400 in 1969. Guess how many we had in 1971? About 120. It had a noticeable, profound effect on the underground press. Washington Free Press, it's a paper in D.C. that I wrote about in my book. There was no more embattled paper in America, I don't think, than the Washington Free Press. They didn't fold after Columbia pulled out, but they came darn close. And all these papers were on a shoestring anyway. So, you know, you lose a major advertiser, it'd be like us at Throttle losing Budweiser. You know, they would have put us out. So, boom. So what was it going on in Buffalo during this time? Well, there was no fake news in Buffalo, but there were fake rumors. I did find a FBI memo which talked about there was a professor at Rosary Hill College. He had come from Sunyab, and he was involved with New Left activities there. So this was unacceptable. So they started a rumor to try to get his teaching certificate pulled and his employment dropped at Rose Hill College. I don't know if he got fired or not. I don't know the name of the person that has been redacted. So I don't know if it got him fired. And another memo, Alfred University. Is Alfred University around here? Yeah. Is it? Kind of. It's advantageous. Dean of Students is a source of proper coverage. This dean has furnished valuable information. However, efforts are being made to develop the source within the SDS chapter. So they were very interested in SDS activity at Alfred University. So to that, I can only say thank you, Dean Wormer, for giving away, you know, for being valuable and furnishing valuable information to the FBI in this case. That's about all I could find in Buffalo. Sorry. Just wasn't a lot going on here. So, on March 8, 1971, Everybody was at home watching the fight of the century between Joe Frazier and Muhammad Ali. An anonymous private group calling themselves Citizens Commission to investigate the FBI raided a Bureau field office in Medea, Pennsylvania. And they carried away 1,000 memorandums, many of them you saw here tonight, and detailed descriptions of their wiretapping, and then they mailed them to newspapers all over America. We still don't know who these people are. They managed to remain secret since 1971. It's pretty remarkable. Boom. Some of the headlines that came out just after COINTELPRO was exposed. And then the revelations prompted a terse memo on April 28 by J. Edgar Hoover. He abruptly canceled not just the Rational Observer, not just New Left, but all of them. Espionage, white hate groups, Communist Party, extremists, Socialist Workers' Party, in it all of them. Just like that.
Or just change the names?
No, not well, yeah, I know. Change the names. Things were turning pretty bad against him at that point. Y'all know who Hale Boggs is?
Yeah.
Okay, you know what happened to Hale Boggs.
Yeah.
I'm not a conspiracy theorist, normally. But I gotta tell you, this looks pretty funky to me. Okay? First of all, on April 5th, 1971, just within a week of COINTELPRO exploding all over the newspapers, Hale Boggs said that J. Edgar Hoover called for his resignation and said he's like using the tactics of the Soviet Union and Hitler's Gestapo, and Hoover went ballistic over that. Then, on April 7th, Boggs came out again and said that the FBI and Hoover had him under surveillance. The charge of the FBI, once again, they were enraged. They said, we are not, they vehemently denied having him under surveillance. October of 72, Boggs' twin-engine plane vanished over Alaska. And it has never, to this day, it has not been found. And then, Hoover died of a heart attack May 2nd, 1972. I'm not, like I said, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I'm just saying, these things seem to fall in pretty good order.
Wait, Hoover died before Boggs then?
I'm sorry?
Hoover died before Boggs?
Yeah.
April 7th, October 72, May 2nd. Yeah, he did. Hoover actually died. That doesn't matter.
He's still kind of from the time.
So it went to court. Hobson v. Wilson. I was looking for a name like FBI versus the United States of America, but that wasn't it. It was called Hobson v. Wilson. This is where they actually talk about the Rational Observer. They said, the Supreme Court said, publication of a newspaper under government auspices with its true author misrepresented, which cautions peace demonstrators, they might be embarrassed later in life. Remember that line they were talking about, don't do anything in haste today, you're going to get embarrassed by it tomorrow. Might be embarrassed later in life for the present activities, and which urges students to seek an injunction against publication of another newspaper is unlawful. 1977, 6 student radicals were awarded cash settlement from the FBI, amounting to about $2,000. And a couple of the defendants didn't get anything. They said, no, sorry. Dagmar Wilson, who was leading the, what was the name of her organization? Anybody help me out here? Dagmar Wilson. Anyway, she was declared, they said that her organization was not hurt. So she got 0. So a couple of them didn't get anything. A couple of them got a couple $1,000s. Now let's back up a little bit. Talk about the CIA, because the FBI was basing COINTELPRO on a CIA program that actually started a year sooner, Operation Chaos. Now you talk about some cloak and dagger. You talk about some paranoia. Nothing matches this, Operation Chaos. President Johnson started repeatedly pressuring Director Helms to find examples of foreign influence on the expanding New Left peace movement. A movement causing the president and his advisors so much anxiety that he simply refuses going so quickly without outside help. Now, if you know anything at all about the CIA's charter, what does it say? they will not, cannot investigate American citizens. So, to get around that, he said, we're looking for foreign influence in these programs. That's how they got around spying on American citizens. Helms got counterintelligence staff chief James Angleton. This guy, there's no other way to say it, he was a prick. All right, I'm sorry, he was. That was went on tape too. So he set up this extremely secretive special operations program and appointed Richard Ober, another similar personality, to head it up. Ober was really, he was a deep snow guy. I mean, he had everything. He had that remorse, he had that gut. He could do anything. He'd kill you and not bat an eye. They even kept it shielded within the CIA. This was a super, I mean, a top secret operation. And only a handful of people knew about it when it was going on. So they had a report. They did some work and they came back with a report titled International Connections of the U.S. Peace Movement, which came out on November 15, 1967. President read it and said, They found no evidence of foreign influence. Johnson said, no, you're not trying hard enough. So what did they do? They expanded it. Okay, even better. 80 full-time agents were eventually hired and charged with participating in these radical activities stateside. Very important to realize it was being done stateside because it was patently illegal. Patently illegal. In fact, it comes up in a minute. So by June of '68, Chaos is receiving intelligence of 1,000 reports a month on American citizens. And it's all going into this computer program they set up. And I can't think of the name of the computer off the top of my head. But they're putting in 1,000 reports a month of American citizens, of information. They were getting all kinds of information. Everything that the FBI would get, the CIA was getting. So all this information being put in on these Americans. So they did a final report to Johnson right before he left office. Best titled thing that ever came out of it, Restless Youth. Concluded that once again, American student dissent is a result of homegrown social and political alienation, not stimulated by an international conspiracy. So Richard Helms wrote, striking similarities between Americans around the world. It's a paper's conclusion among militants and less committed youth alike. There's a growing belief in the efficacy of violence as a political device. Okay, he's just comparing us with other youth in other countries. But there was a warning. The CIA knew it was doing something it was not supposed to be doing. But you will, of course, be aware of the peculiar sensitivity, which attached to the fact the CIA had prepared a report on student activities, both here and abroad. We're saying, you know, we're spying on Americans. We're not really not supposed to be doing that. Okay? But so what? Johnson left, Nixon comes in. An updated version was sent to Nixon by Kissinger, and it left out any incidents of domestic dissidence. Just left out. I don't know why. I don't know what the purpose was for doing that. But Angleton, who was the most paranoid human being on earth, he thought there was a Russian under every bed in America. I mean, this guy was out there. He thought that Russians had even infiltrated the Nixon White House. So he sends Richard Ober into the Nixon White House to work with Haldeman, Ehrlichman, and Nixon himself on chaos, right? But then he gets over to spy on Haldeman, Ehrlichman, and Nixon while he's in the White House working with them on Operation Chaos. This is right how to get smart, right? I mean, this is tone of silence stuff. So the Plummer's unit was also receiving Chaos's anti-war intelligence. And then this is Helms sent out this thing, and this is the last line I thought was priceless. Dick Helms has submerged his personal hostility to Mr. Hoover and has afforded a degree of cooperation unexpected from the CIA. Helms and Hoover could not stand each other. In fact, things got so bad at this time between the CIA and the FBI that they were forbidden from interacting at all. So agents would they would meet each other in parking garages and share information. They were still getting together and meeting, even though they were expressly forbidden from doing so. But they had to do it in secret. So they go in parking decks in downtown DC and meet and share information that way. Then in 1969, this is again the Quicksilver Times, a DC paper, they were infiltrated for 18 months by an undercover agent named Salvatore Sal Ferreira as a writer and photographer. Now, I talked to some Quicksilver Collective members about Sal Ferreira. And they said, well, you know, Sal didn't live in the collective. You know, a lot of those people lived in communes in DC and other large cities. Sal didn't live in a commune. He lived in a townhouse that you needed to be buzzed into. And he had top-of-the-line camera equipment. He always had money to spend. But we didn't think he was a plant. We thought he was a trust fund baby or something like that. I talked to a man named Bill Bloom, William Bloom, one of the founders of Quicksilver. He's 82 years old now. I went up to DC to see him in his apartment. He was good friends with Sal Ferreira. He and Sal had lunch together, dinner together. They student taught together. They wrote together. They hung out together. They worked on a project together, and this was an incredible story. They decided that Quicksilver Times decided they wanted to do a feature story, and they wanted to run the names, addresses, and phone numbers of everybody they saw going in and out of the CIA one day. So they got a Volkswagen, and they parked it outside the CIA gate at Langley. And they take one of the tires off, they get it up on a jack, they open the back, and they're sitting there. Sal and Bill are sitting there pretending like they're fixing this Volkswagen, and they're writing down the license plate of every car that goes into the CIA parking lot. Vendors, contractors, employees, didn't matter who it was. Well, back in those days, you could go to the Division of Motor Vehicles, and they had a big book, and you could look up license plate numbers in this book and get names and addresses and phone numbers. That's what they did. And my friend Bruce Smith went down from Washington, D.C. to Richmond, to the Department of Motor Vehicles, which is where all these were located, and he helped them. And they looked up hundreds of license plate numbers, got names, phone numbers, and they published them all in Quicksilver Times. And Sal was behind that. Sal was a part of that. Sal was sitting outside of his employer because he worked there. But he didn't tell anybody. And so they published all these names and everything. So the CIA came out and said, oh, yeah, so what? They published all these names. I guess they're trying to get a little bit of free publicity, blah, blah, blah. Well, reporters from the Washington Post and Washington Times, back then Washington Star, called a lot of these people. A lot of people just hung up on them. Someone said, I don't care that you know that I work at the CIA, so what? So it really didn't go anywhere. The story didn't get any real traction. But I just thought it was funny that Sal sat out there all that time and wrote all these license plates. He probably knew half of the people going in and out of the place. A couple of times security guards came out and asked him, you guys need some help? He said, no, we got it. All day they were out there doing that. So Sal, for 18 months, was with Quicksilver. Really interesting what happens to him afterwards. He leaves Quicksilver. He winds up going to Paris. Mysteriously, he bumps into a woman. He meets up with this woman in Paris named Lori Bronigan, I think is her name. And they find out that there's an ex-CIA agent there named Philip A.G. writing a book in Paris. Because Philip technically was still under the CIA's secrecy contract. And as long as he stayed in America, he could not write about the CIA. So he goes to Paris, where he could write about the CIA. And he's got this old typewriter, and he's working in a coffee shop. He's dirt poor, he's broke. He's writing this book every day. Lori and Sal Ferreira approach Philip, and they befriend him. And Sal says, you know, Lori's got money. If you need money while you're staying in Paris, we can help you out. He says, Philip jumps at the opportunity. Of course, he's broke. He said, of course, I'm writing this book. I don't have any money. I'm not working. I would love to have some help. So they start giving him money. And then one day, Sal says, Philip, that typewriter you're using is junk. We've got a really good one. Would you like to borrow it and use it? Philip goes, heck yes. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So they bring this really nice typewriter in. It's got this nice case on it and everything. So he works on this thing for a long time. And then all of a sudden, Lori and Sal are gone. They left Paris. After finishing his manuscript, Philip discovers quite accidentally one day that there's a false cover inside of his typewriter case. He removes it, and it's full of microphones and tracking equipment. Okay, it was done up by the CIA. CIA knew exactly where he was and what he was doing. He was transmitting his location back to CIA headquarters every single day. He used it. If you look up his book online, and the title escapes me right now, but it's Philip Agee. The cover on the book is that typewriter with all the guts exposed, and you can see all the wiring and communications equipment that was in it. Sal left. Sal now lives under a different name in Long Beach, California. I found him, and I called him, and he hung up on me. I don't know why. First he said he was not Sal Ferreira, then he hung up. So thanks for letting me know. So anyway, but he was part of Operation Chaos. And he managed to keep it secret for 18 months there. So by the end of 1972, Chaos was subject to a comprehensive review by Cordmeyer and Inspector General Bro, who raised questions about its legality. Oh, go ahead, you think? So Helms and Richard Karmasines resigned over Chaos. And Nixon appointed Schlesinger, who later described Chaos as a questionable program, again, as agency director. And Chaos was finally terminated in March of '74 by Gerald Ford and director William Colby. 1974, it finally took them to and apparently they were supposed to have erased all the information that they collected on Americans. What do you think?
Right.
Yeah. Right. So that story exploded in the press. Huge CIA operation reported in the U.S. against anti-war forces, other dissidents in Nixon years, all patently illegal, of course. Then lastly, in 1976, the final report, the major finding, the community finds the product of intelligence investigations have been disseminated without adequate controls. Reports on lawful political activity and law-abiding citizens have been disseminated by agencies having no proper reason to receive them. Information that should have been discarded, purged, or sealed have been retained and is available for future use. Oh, yep, we just answered our own question, didn't we? So how far have we come since 1976? It seems like we've come full circle, or we haven't gone anywhere at all. I don't know which it is. What questions can I answer for you about all this? This only took up about 3 years of my life. Yes?
Did you come across anything going on at Howard University? If they were particularly concerned with DC colleges and black nationalism?
There was very little New Left activity at Howard University. I don't know why. The Black Panthers didn't seem to have much to do with it. There was not much any other SDS activity or anything like that at Howard. But it's a great question because I would have thought, one would think, a primarily black university, there would be great Black Panther presence, but there wasn't. There just wasn't. There was American University. There was more at Catholic University than there was at Howard, actually. So, and it wasn't much. That wasn't much either. So yeah, it just didn't happen. I don't know why, but it didn't. Yes.
In New York, were East Village Other or the Village Voice highly targeted
East Village Other was.
EVO?
Yeah, EVO was, which I thought was a terrific magazine. And Village Voice, was kind of left alone because it had kind of gone above ground, and they were more interested in profit margins than they were in Vietnam sentiment and things like that. So they knew that the radicals would not go to the Village Voice. They knew the radicals were going to the other papers, the underground papers. So that's why they particularly targeted them. Yes?
You mentioned quite a few times that you couldn't find information on the assessment of these programs.
Right.
Do you think it was done and it wasn't available to you, or did they ever not actually assess it?
That I can't find out. I think sometimes they would just close the book on that and move on to the next one. They might, the SAC may have said, well, this happened, and this happened. Hoover said, okay, great, next.
Okay.
So there was no follow-ups. There was never any follow-ups on this stuff. And it just doesn't exist. I think the documents would have been there if there were, because everything else was there, but not that. So, yes, sir.
As a researcher, any of these special agents who participated in these wonderful, questionable programs, to your knowledge, any of them face justice or what they did to their victims?
They went to court, but there was no active legal recrimination against them. I actually found out the name of the guy who came up with the idea of the Rational Observer and the name of the agent who actually wrote the articles. He's dead. Now, it was a black agent that came up with the idea, and he's still around. And the guy's name is in my book, but his name escapes me. He went to court. He was named in the suit, but he did not. There was no action taken against him. It all fell on these other higher level directors.
So it is, do you mind? if I can?
Please
So,
continue.
It is accurate to say this society, I came from Iraq, by the way, for anybody. I was 30 years old when I came here. I ran away from dictatorship, which CIA was supporting. But I've been here since 1990. So I'm like, what, 99 years old now. Hoover was a result of a society. Hoover didn't come out of nowhere.
No.
So the society just at that time kept the victims, like people like you and like everybody here who we trying to use our brain. They were under surveillance. I like that, one nation under surveillance.
Yeah, I know. No kidding.
So they were under surveillance, but they didn't do anything. Hoover and Hoover types, whether they were FBI or whatever, they kept coming up with laws to protect their act.
Yep.
That's why our hands are tied to go after them when they come after us for just using our brain. So I'm grateful that I see a full room of people who they came because of your interested subject. But where to go from here? The picture you showed us that we went full circle and we got Trump.
Yeah.
We deserve a Trump. Maybe you guys disagree, but we deserve a Trump because when I came here for myself, I registered as a Democrat. But I'm myself, even in Democrat, I'm very disappointed because to me, they became like Republicans.
Mhm.
I'm not trying to offend anybody or to defend Republicans. My question is, I have a son who went to American University.
Mhm.
He did his master's there. He has 2 grandchildren. I did not see them. I mean, I have 2 grandchildren. He has 2 children. One of them is almost 1 year old. The other is about 3. I didn't go and see them because I'm afraid I will put my son in jeopardy because I'm a big mouth and the FBI here been after me since 2002 because I participated in anti-war activities with Western New York Peace Center. They accuse me of a million things and I'm desperately trying to reach to the media. I'm trying to raise awareness. Like, hey, American, this is a beautiful country. It's a beautiful country. It's the most beautiful country on the planet. Let's fight for it. I don't think we're doing enough fight. I think the special agents who been going to Hoover and Hoover said, hey, yeah, go, nuke them. And you have my support. People like Hoover, they still exist in federal agents and especially the FBI, and I'm talking through my own experience.
Mhm.
My life been on hold since 2002. I found out they've been sitting outside my house taking pictures for people who visited me. As a result of that, I lost my property, I lost my job. I'm lucky I have wonderful family who they've been taking care of me financially. But while I was in Iraq fighting against Islamic extremists and against Iraq becoming a chaos, even though I was against the war, but they were here digging my grave and I'm getting nowhere. see people like you doing stories like this, I shut up because I'm not the only victim. I realize, hey, there are thousands, if not millions, of good people who they want to do good for humanity. They get chased by FBI since Hoover's time until today. My question is, what are we going to do? What is the solution? What is the solution? Anything we do, it's not just Hoover, Truman, since the 1947.
Right.
A student was sitting at the embassy in Moscow. He wrote him an email. He said, oh, Stalin is trying to swallow the Europe. Let's do the containment policy. And that containment policy still exists until today, to the point Obama turns his face away from Iran, what Iran is doing to the region, swallowing Iraq, imposing more and more, excuse my language, bullshit on human rights. And then comes Trump, goes to Saudi Arabia, dance with them, and give his blessing for, they called it an Arab NATO. 17 Arab nations now, they sharpen their knives to start a war in the region under the excuse of fighting Iran. And our kids again will go to a war and become a victim or the same bullshit like Vietnam's war. My question is, what we gonna do? What we should do?
What should we do?
More than
I'm asking
publishing
the
a
question
book.
to everyone. What should we do?
For me, I will do whatever it takes. I need somebody to put my ugly face on TV to raise awareness among Americans, because it's not just ISIS in the Middle East. It's ISIS here by violating our rights when we want to live and act intellectually. What happened to our rights as a freedom of speech? Where is that? It's just on books. So again, my question is to you as a researcher, how we can take your excellent work one step further?
I'm open to ideas. One thing about Hoover you need to understand, Hoover, I always said, he must have had pictures of everybody in Washington naked. Because he got away with, literally with murder. And nobody raised a finger. And I don't understand how one man can stay in business, headed for the FBI for, what, 35 years? From 1930s up to 1971, and not have anything. You know, he died. I really think if he had stayed alive long enough, they may have attempted, after COINTELPRO, to prosecute him. But the SOB died before they had a chance to, in a heart attack. How convenient. Or he took a pill, I don't know. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I was wondering, I was expecting something about two things. One area is the GI movement, what involvement were they in? There was a big resistance at that time.
Yeah.
A lot of papers, and I was expecting to hear something like that. And also, places like Buffalo, I didn't live there, but they had a red squad, and there were red squads in cities all around the country. Do you have anything to say about any of those things?
I've not gone. My research was confined to Virginia and D.C.
Okay.
So I don't know anything about what happened here other than a couple of little things that I found.
Okay.
The GI resistance movement was huge, and I have a whole chapter in my book devoted to, in Virginia, the GI resistance. But there's a great documentary, if you want to watch it, it's called Sir, No Sir.
Oh, yeah.
Have you seen that? It's a great documentary about the GI resistance movement in the 60s. And that's why the coffee shops popped up. Places like the Oleo Strut and the place in D.C. Yeah. It was all part of the GI resistance movement. It was huge. And I found several GI underground newspapers. There were anti-war newspapers published by GIs on military bases. In fact, Fort Eustis, Virginia, was the first military base for the base brass to actually give permission for these papers to be distributed on base.
But nobody like the FBI.
Good for us, right?
They weren't interested in pursuing that. I mean, in the stuff there, when you listed all the groups, it was nothing about the GI movement.
Well, there was a women's liberation movement, there was a lesbian feminist movement, there was a prison movement, there were too many movements for me to go into. If y'all wanted to stay here till midnight, I'd have been happy to talk about some of the others. But no, you're right, there were many more. I'm just trying to introduce people to things that's going on. Any more of it, well, you can read my book and find out more about it. But there are many good books. Ken Waxberger's book down there, Voices of the Underground, is a great resource for more of the things you're talking about too. And some, in fact, I'm working with Ken to try to get permissions from many underground papers to publish them and put them online as downloadable PDFs. Open access, free of charge, so you can start downloading these underground papers. And in fact, my paper Throttle is already available online through a website called virginiachronicle.com, and you can see all 18 years of Throttle magazine as downloaded PDFs, if you're so interested. But so many of these underground papers are just dying away. Bell and Howell Laboratories did create microfilm copies of many underground papers in the 60s and 70s. Tom Forsad, with the Underground Press Syndicate, struck a deal with Bell and Howell to get them microfilmed as they came in. But the problem with microfilm reels, if you know anything about microfilm, it's very frustrating. But what's even more frustrating about these is they're not in any kind of order. And there's 498 total reels, encompassing 1,000 papers in the United States and in Europe, and they're in no order. So God bless you if you want to try to do any research. You might get lucky. Like me, I sat in the University of Virginia's library and for days scrolling through papers from Russia and England and just trying to find the one gem from Virginia that I was looking for, you know. It's very frustrating. So, yes, question?
I was just going to say that sounds like a graduate student project. Find some funding, find a library.
Make an index.
Yeah.
Just make an index. Anything. That's a start. Yeah, it would be. It would be a good graduate student. And just put them in some kind of order. The quality is crap. The quality's no good on many of them. So it's a very frustrating process. But they are preserved, in however weak as it is. So if you do any kind of research into that, find a library, a college library that might have the Underground Press on microfilm. They may have a collection. Here, it's a good place to start. What else? Anybody? Yes, sir.
I was going to say, I really appreciate events like this because for me being, I guess, not as the same generation, there seems to be a big gap in generation memory because of the state suppression and deconstruction of specifically the civil rights movements, black movements, and new left movements under Monto. I was wondering, you focused in the specifically on underground newspapers, if there might be any materials off the top of your head you'd recommend for just further reading into clinical prose and the FBI and CIA's attacks on the civil rights movements, the left student movements, that kind of thing, and sort of where it sort of dissolved.
Ooh, off the top of my
big
head.
thing, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, because civil rights, the new left movement dovetailed right off of student rights. All the new left people, many of them were civil rights workers too. And I know in Virginia, I can't speak for the rest of the country, but I know in Virginia, we had a large group of civil rights workers who went into Southern Virginia to do a lot of work. This Title IX, 1964, they were ensuring the Title IX of the Civil Rights Act was being enacted. So they were going into businesses and talking and trying to get people enrolled in schools and things like that. And literally overnight, from 1964 to 1965, they all bugged out of Southern Virginia and they started working on anti-Vietnam stuff. So it was like almost they turned their back on the civil rights movement. They saw okay, we got that law passed, so let's move on to something else. And that mercurial nature is unfortunately very common. These were young kids at the time, and they got distracted a lot. They bounce around from one thing to another, and it's kind of why the underground press is such a frustrating thing to research because they're all over the place. One issue doesn't look like the next. They frequently don't have volume numbers on them or years. They just kind of left it off, and most of them were on LSD when they laid them up anyway. So gosh knows what they look like. My friend Joe Schenkman, the cartoonist stuff, and he was talking about he worked for one of the ones. It wasn't EVO in New York. It was one of the RAT, Subterranean News. Oh, there's some great. That'd be a great place to start. Google RAT Subterranean News. My friend Jeff Sharrow, he lives in Austin now. He's doing a lot of videos and a lot of printed material on what was going on in New York, particularly in New York City at the time. So start with him. And if you want Jeff Sharrow's email, I can get that to you too. I've got cards I can hand out to everybody. Please make sure you get one. if you have questions, you want to talk to somebody like that, email me, I'll get you their contact info. But Jeff would be a great one for you to talk to about that. But warning about Jeff. Okay, you ask him if it's raining, you'll get a 15-minute oration on rain. He's a great guy, but like many from the 60s, he, you know, if you're going to remember the
What?
60s, you weren't there.
You ask him what time it is, he explains how to make a watch.
Yeah, they made make a watch. So anyway, I wish I could help you more with that, but I just, you know, just start with people like that and just kind of spread out from there. That's all I can say. Anybody else? What? Yes, sir.
Sure. So I feel like you have a pretty good understanding as to like the government's tactics of disrupting anything that forces people to like think for themselves and try and take power back from them. Don't you ever feel like you're just like powerless to do anything about it? Like,
Sure.
because like you know, like we're getting screwed.
Yeah.
So like if you say something about it, you're gonna get picked apart.
Yeah, so what you try to do, now what I tried to do, my most recent project, I got really involved with the death penalty in Virginia, right? So I decided I was going to write a book about the Virginia State Penitentiary. So I pitched it. I thought, here's a chance for me to talk about what I believe in a book form under disguise of something else, which kind of what it is. So I got a publisher to buy into it, the same publisher who published my 2 books here. And it will come out in September, and I got to talk about death penalty cases in that. So that's kind of my way of getting what I believe out. And I do some editorializing, and of course I do. You know, history's got to be placed in context. The trip down memory lane is great, but if you don't have any context, it means nothing to people. So I thought, well, here's a chance for me to be able to put the death penalty in some kind of context. So I researched back to 1908. The electric chair in Virginia was introduced and went forward from that. So that's the only way I know how, is to try to think of something that I really believe in, then try to write a book around it. I know that's not for everybody, but you just kind of have to search out your own way of doing that. Yes?
Yeah, I enjoyed the presentation and some of the humor, and it points out to me that like the basic tactic of the people in power is to divide and conquer, because there are fewer of them, and there's always a movement. Generally, people all want to be free, and but if you can keep them divided and turned against one another, and you showed some good examples of that. And so I think on the opposite side, we, the movement, or we, the people, need to find a way to come together and unite. I work with, there's an organization called United to End Racism, and just recognizing racism as the basic divider,
Right.
you know, to keep us, you know, fighting each other, all, you know, basically working people fighting each other while the 1% controls things. And basically it works as individuals, we can help each other end our racist patterns, our things that keep us divided, and you know, work with. I think there's a thing, nobody can do everything, but we can all do something, you know, and it's to pick an area that you like, start working together, start organizing.
Right.
And even though there's a lot of different groups, each time you even get a small group together and start organizing a few people around that,
Right.
and then those other groups can come together.
In my death penalty work in Virginia, and a couple of weeks ago, I was in Pennsylvania County, a very depressed part of Virginia. And I was talking to a pastor down there, and he was telling me about a group that he put together called Pennsylvania Together. And it's a group of Republicans, it's Democrats, it's blacks, it's whites, it's all kinds of people who get together once a month. He invited me to come speak at it, which was great. But that was one of those startups. That's one of those starts like you're talking
What's
about.
the aim of that group?
It's called Pennsylvania Together. It's spelled P-I-T-T-S
But what
in
is
Virginia.
their goal, or?
That I don't know yet.
Oh.
He just told me about it. He goes, would you like to come talk to it? I said, well, I'd love to, so I'll find out.
right?
But I know they have a Facebook page,
Yeah.
but that's all I know about them at this point. Anything else? Yes, sir.
I have a comment for the young.
Okay, sure.
Okay, do you mind asking me how old are you?
I'm 25.
25. God bless you. My generation, I think we are the same generation. We screwed your generation. We didn't do.
Yeah, I know.
And I tell you why. We were dreamers. We followed different ideologies. We said, oh, the world would be a better world just by dreaming, just by going on the street and saying, hey, no to war. No, they were what you call them evil here.
Yeah.
They call us evil because they are evil, but they want to paint us evil while we, like when I met Leslie first, I don't know if you know Leslie. I met him in a place like this. There was a movie about the FBI informant, and I felt like American citizen, like shame on FBI to chase like a guy like Leslie.
Right.
What possibly harm Leslie can do to America or to society? So, taking your comment, like you say, we are getting nowhere. Please don't give up. And at your age in Iraq, I was already in prison. I survived prison. I survived torture. My father was 34 years old. They tortured him to death. I didn't see his body. I was 9 years old. I inherited that glory, and I went with it. In Iraq, there was no, in the constitution, something to say I have the right to speak. But I said, choose my language, F that. I will follow it and do and take whatever risk it comes with it. Please don't give up. Your generation has to do much more than just going to demonstrations, just coming to places like this. You need to hold your representative and shake them. Say, hey, look at me in the eye. You're not getting my vote if you don't do this and this and this, and this is a deadline for you to do it. Otherwise, I'm voting for someone else. This country, I hate to say this, is going down the drain because both parties, Republicans and Democrats, are fighting for their own interests, not for yours, not for mine. The same thing in Iraq. In Iraq, stupid Sunnis and Shiites, they both are Muslims. They slaughter each other's throat because one is getting money from Iran, then the other is getting money from Saudi Arabia. I'm telling you, I'm in Buffalo, went to Iraq, even though I was against the war, because I saw American policy is, excuse my language, fucked up policy, supporting people with turbans. They are not supporting people like you and me, who they say, hey, we are here for everybody's right. Like John just said, for women's rights, for black rights, for whatever, Sunni, Shia, Kurd, Arab, Christian. In 2003, there were like 3 million Christians in Iraq. Right now, there are less than 250,000 who got killed, who fled the scene, and we saying we helped Iraq get rid of Saddam. Saddam was son of a bitch, dictator, criminal, and I wanted to get rid of him myself personally. But it's a chaos there. The whole region is chaos and becoming into more chaos, and that chaos will shift here and bite your generation if you guys don't find better way than our generation to unite, and I'm not saying go carry guns like the Black Panthers did, but I'm saying by being on the street, like John said, all of us united, pick one goal and stick to it, and force your representative to come with you and accomplish that goal, then move to next and next and next. This is the only way to save America from FBI becoming more and more vicious, CIA finding ways to do waterboarding in different countries. We did contracts with different countries to take our detainees there just because we are suspicious of them. I'm not saying we should not fight Al-Qaeda or fight Islamic extremists. We should. But here, let's worry about how to make this beautiful country healthy. Like your generation, when they want to talk, they should not fear retaliation from the FBI or from any other government agency. So, my friends, talk. Don't worry about your comfort zone. You might face what I faced. You might face jail. You might lose your job. You might get shot like Dr. King. You think Dr. King didn't know he would get shot? He knew, but he continued. Same thing, my father, he knew Saddam one day will get hold of him. At some point, we have to pay the price for what we believe in.
There is strength in numbers. I do know, there have been a couple of pretty large demonstrations in DC lately, but I do know that in 1971, the end of the Vietnam War, the end of the draft, was hastened by the May Day demonstration in DC when Jim Magruder, who was Nixon's chief of staff, said that Nixon was genuinely shaken by the number of people who showed up. And it did lead to the end of the draft.
They are cowards. If we unite and come up with large numbers, yes, they will shake up and they will.
Yeah, they will. Large numbers work. So, you know, I don't, otherwise, you know, just keep fighting. Anything else? I'm passing my cards around. I hope there are enough.
No, they stopped.
Did they peter out?
Over here. They,
I think they did it, yeah.
All right. Oh gosh, I'm so sorry. My website is dalebrumfield.net. All my contact information is there. So if you have anything, you know, go on my website and contact me through there. Okay.
You will definitely hear from me.
Okay.
And there are 2 copies of Dale's books up front, but Leslie is going to be purchasing more. If anyone's interested, write your name down, provide information.
Yeah, put your name
He can
down.
let you know.
This one may be more of interest to you. This one is only Richmond. And it's good, but if you're not from Richmond, you may not get a lot of it. But this one is about Virginia and DC. And this talks more about things like the GI. Some of the broader movements nationwide are discussed more in this one. So yes?
Can we put in requests for the new one that's coming out in September?
I'm sure you can.
Yeah.
I'm sure you can. Okay, I got nothing else. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.